Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. We're looking at monotheism today, and we're looking is the fact that God is absolute perfection, proof of monotheism. So let's get started. Thanks for being here. Check out our other videos. We're on plato.stanford.edu, the Stanford Dictionary of Philosophy. I'm a firm believer in monotheism. I would guess you probably are too, but maybe not. We invite you to become one. The property of being the ultimate cause of my existence appears to be an example of a property of God that isn't pure perfection, but rather a contingent expression of pure perfection, namely the exercise of creative power. So the fact that I exist, is that a necessary property of God? Or is that a contingent property of God? I could see where people call that a contingent property of God. But let's keep reading, and we're going to see the implications of that. God is perhaps better and more splendid for exercising creative power, but he's not better and more splendid for having created me. We say that, but see, then we're in the image of God, even though it's a fallen image. So there's debates back and forth on all that. We're looking at monotheism today. But neither is it a limitation or privation, though it is not, of course, a full or complete expression of the relevant divine perfection. Okay, so God is all wisdom. God is all knowledge. God is all power. But he created me. Is that just, is he all powerful because he created me? Well, you could debate that, because that would mean he's the creator. He tends to not think that. There's a few things in this article, even though I really appreciate his commitment to monotheism, that, you know, I just haven't jumped off on. And I'm sure it's because I'm just not as smart as these people. And maybe. Nor does it appear to be a mixed perfection. God's instantiating a possible world containing me precludes his instantiating possible worlds with which lack his interesting feature, but entails no inherent limitation or defect in his creative abilities. So this goes back to possible worlds, which I'm not a huge fan. When I was studying for doctorate in Christian philosophy, you just get into possible worlds. Leibniz really kind of developed that a lot in the early 1700s. And saying this is the best of all possible worlds. I think when you get into possible worlds, you can really run into error. So he's saying if God had chosen not to create me or you, would he be any less God? And if he wouldn't be any less God, then that's not one of his essential properties. He didn't have to create us. But then does God have to do anything? Or he chooses. He's divine choice, divine action, on and on. So at least one real property then is neither an imperfection, mixed perfection, or pure perfection. At least one of God's real properties isn't a pure perfection. Both of these assumptions on which the argument is based are thus false. The argument from divine perfection, does this prove monotheism, divine perfection, like the argument for God's simplicity, fails because God appears to possess some of his real properties contingently. He's really the creator, but did he have to create Mars, you know? Yet the question remains, could two gods be distinguished on the basis of difference in their contingent properties? Could one God create Mars, one God not create Mars, but they're still both perfect in every way? See, so could you define the two gods based on that? Some Trinitarians actually do. It's doubtful that the contingent properties we've discussed will serve our purpose. Knowing that Jones exists would, in a world containing Jones, be a property of any omniscient being existing in that world, and create Smith would, in a world containing Smith, be a property of any creator of that world. Perhaps all of God's real or contingent properties are expressions of his perfect knowledge, goodness, and creative power. Perhaps it's impossible for two gods to exhibit different expressions of this in the same possible world. In any possible world, two omniscient beings would have the same things, being supremely good. Their appreciations, valuations of things in the world would presumably be identical, and each would be the creative ground for everything that exists in that world. If all of God's real or contingent properties are expressions of his pure perfections, in any possible world, two gods couldn't exhibit different expressions of these perfections of that world, then no possible world contains two gods. If you got one ultimate perfection, if you have a second ultimate perfection, it's identical, which means they're the same thing. So there wouldn't be anything to differentiate them. They'd be the same thing. So there could only be one God. And I would agree with that argument. And I would think some of these submodalities of argumentation about contingency would not be right. But I've been reading some Aquinas, and he seems to, and Duns Scotus, make this argument that this is the difference in persons in the Godhead. So we're going to keep going along this. I believe there's one God. He's perfect. He's one. He deserves our worship, and he became a man in Jesus Christ. God bless you. Check out our other videos. We'll see you. Bye-bye.